we don't like to hear it, but we're being confronted with 11 million bits of information per second, and we can only process between 50 and 60.
I mean, it's so logical. And then we wonder why, as professionals in the industry, why the voices that are the most heard are the ones actually that know the least amount,
We call it a whataboutery.
Whataboutery, yes.
Seriously, but what about them?
This episode of TRT the Podcast is brought to you by Connect, fully electric tractors.
G'day guys, welcome back to TRT the Podcast. We have an incredibly special guest here today. She's a world-renowned sports psychologist, author of many books, including The Science of Equestrian Sports and Perfect Mind, Perfect Ride. Her research has reached many journal publications, lectures at many international conferences around the world. My guest is a professor of sustainable equestrianism at the University of Applied Sciences, Van Hal Laurenstein, here in the Netherlands. An energized and passionate person, not afraid to speak about important matters when it comes to things like horse welfare. She seeks a sustainable future for horses, humans, and the environment. She demonstrates, which I've seen evidently recently in Sweden at the conference there, evidence-based theories that can help us find practical solutions to real life problems. Inga Wolframm, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tristan. Very nice, very nice. How did you come up with all of that?
Oh, just a bit of internet and a bit of remembering back to some of the places and spaces we've shared, stages and arenas.
Very good. Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So before we get into the real gritty stuff, tell us the story of how you became actually a horse person. I've actually also never heard that story.
Well, when I was 8 years old, I started gymnastics. And I did gymnastics for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I was injured all the time. And my mum, she'd heard from, I don't even know whom, she heard from someone that there was this vaulting club. And so she thought, well, she's injured all the time doing gymnastics. Perhaps she should be doing gymnastics from a horse because it might help.
Oh, there you go.
Which is ludicrous in and of itself, but
it's a great start for riding, actually.
No, it's fantastic. And the funny thing is, well, I had one overuse injury when I was 16 because I was doing this movement where I was just hanging off one arm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was really, well, all the vaulters who are listening to this now, you'll all laugh your heads off because I think just about everybody does this now. But it was the height of creativity at the time because I was sort of hanging on the side of the horse, hanging onto one arm with my legs sort of, stretched as you do. And I just got an overuse injury, but that was it. So coming from gymnastics where I was injured all the time, and don't even ask me how, to vaulting where I did, honestly, oh man, because I was also a flyer. So, I was always the one on top.
Mm-hmm.
And I would fall in front of the horse, behind the horse, between the horse's legs. We were, and this is sharing my age, this is how old I am, but we were invited to the trial event before the first World Championships, the World Equestrian Games.
Mm-hmm.
They were being held in 1990 in Sweden, and we were invited in 1989 to do a trial event. And to us, we weren't a top tier team in Germany. We were we were kind of just below the top teams.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, this was a really big thing. And I was 14, 13? I don't know. And because this is now cognitive overload, which we'll get into later, so I can't quite calculate when it was. But anyway, you can see me calculating now. So I was 14. So obviously really exciting. And we did this thing where I had to do a cartwheel off the back of the person standing on the horse, and the person sitting on the neck of the horse had to catch me. You know what happened, right? She didn't catch me. So I fell head first
There was a trial
into
event.
the sand in Sweden. Massive international event.
Yeah.
It's okay. So, I lost a few brain cells along the way. But this is how I got into horses. And it does teach you teamwork, balance, but it also teaches you how to, that it's not a bike. Because we weren't a top club,
Yeah.
we didn't always have the best horses. So our horses were wonderful, but they were brought on from other disciplines, and so generally they had some quirks, right? Because it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes they would just get scared because and they'd run, and they when the audience would applaud, they'd run off, but you'd still be sitting on there, and and it'd be a competition. But then you had to just wait it out, and you'd have to sit, and you'd have to try and calm the horse down, because that was your job also as a vaulter.
Yeah.
The lunge obviously would stand in the middle, but you're the one on top. And I guess that also taught me how important it is that, from a very early age, I'm doing this together with the horse.
Yeah.
And when I was still vaulting, I started vaulting without pads. So we were standing on the horse's back.
Yeah.
But that also meant that you really had to do the whole balance thing.
Yeah.
But you had to be doubly careful that when you'd swing and when you'd land, that you'd be careful that you didn't so the horse would go.
Yeah. His reaction would, of course.
Yeah, of course. And then you'd and then you'd go.
Yeah.
And then he'd go off.
Yeah.
So this is how I got into horses. And again, another good story. My most serious injury I got not when vaulting, but when riding one of our vaulting horses, who I trusted completely when I vaulted him. But in riding, he was a bit difficult. He used to buck a bit. And he bucked me into the wall of the arena. So I had a concussion for 2 weeks. And so, and this was me with a hard hat on. So, but imagine, when vaulting, as I just said, used to fall off all the time. The one thing I really had a concussion when I was just riding that vaulting horse.
With a helmet.
With a helmet.
And then normally, of course, vaulting you don't.
Yeah. And I used to do also, and you haven't asked this yet, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And I used to do team vaulting, and when I was still doing it, when you were 18, you had to leave the team. Again, that's changed now. And then, your only other option would be solo vaulting. And at the time, again, also that's changed now, you could do solo vaulting from when you were 16. So, and I vaulted until I was 19, and then I sort of left abroad and all the rest of it. But so I did both. But if I say so myself, I was not bad as a solo vaulter. I did have some talent, not fantastic, but I had some talent. But so when I didn't, this is going to sound really odd, but when I didn't make a mistake, I did really well. So when the routine went smooth, faultlessly, then I would get really good scores. However, if there was just one tiny mistake that crept in, I just lose it all. And when I studied and I guess, so when I first, and then, and then I moved abroad because of university studies and all the rest of it. And
went to Essex first?
No, I first went to Brunel. I did politics first. I worked for a while in politics, and then after a while I decided, actually, I don't really want to do this. I want to go back to sport. And that's then when this idea came back that, hey, that whole sports psychology stuff, I find that really interesting, partly also because I realized that the one thing that really did hold me back was not being able to keep my focus when I was making mistakes. So it was really my mental capacity at the time that sort of, that held me back. And I guess that's sort of what attracted me to the whole, hey, sports and horse sports in all its facets isn't just about what you can physically do.
Yeah.
Very important, of course.
Yeah.
But you can be really good physically, but if you can't keep it together mentally, then all the physical talent's not going to help you. And I guess that attracted me. And that was partly born, funnily enough, not from the traumatic experiences of falling off the horse all the time.
Yeah.
No, but more the whole, if something went wrong, and and again with horses, stuff does go wrong.
Yeah.
You might do a misstep.
Yeah.
But then if I'm thrown off my routine and I can't recover, then that's a shame. But that has nothing to do with my ability, but purely with what my head does.
Yeah. And then you stayed in horses because you also have horses now.
Yeah, I do. And then, well, by now, we're in England by now, and we're doing my master's, which I did. It was a combined master, human and equine science. It's human and equine sports science. It was a combined master's with Writtle College and Essex University.
Mm-hmm.
So we did the human sports science in Essex and the horsey stuff in Writtle, and that was great. Oh God, it was just the best time. I absolutely loved it. In the weekend, we'd go to Writtle, and I lived on campus in Colchester. So any English listeners now, I was a proper Essex girl for a little while, and we used to go out in Colchester. I've got no idea whether you've ever been to Colchester. It was just an old army town, but it was good. Friday nights in the town.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went and worked at Hartpury University. Sorry, guys. Hartpury University. At the time, it was still Hartpury College. Worked there for 2.5 years. And then I also started on my 3-year accreditation course as a sports psychologist. I did that at the same time. Oh, yeah. And I also started my PhD part-time. And I honestly have no idea. So I worked full-time at Hartpury. I worked there as a warden because I also lived on campus, so I was also, keeping the kids in check, which was great, which I absolutely loved. Do you know that also I'm a qualified bouncer.
Oh, right.
I think my license might have expired by now, but I was actually a licensed bouncer, which is cool. And I then followed a 3-year accreditation course as a sports psychologist, and I also did my PhD. And apparently also had time to sleep. I still don't. I mean, I still do a lot now, but sometimes I look back and I think, oh yeah, I didn't have a husband and a child. That might have been it.
Yeah,
I did also have a horse there.
Yeah.
And after a little while, though, I then decided that I wanted to go back. That being a very broad term, because at the time I didn't have my PhD, and then in Germany at the time, equine university courses there, few and far between. There's a few more now, but I also didn't have my PhD, so there would have been no chance of getting a job. And so I saw this job offer in the Netherlands, and they wanted somebody to come and teach in English. So I thought, the Netherlands, why not?
Yeah.
So I flew over here. They offered me the job, and that was also at Van der Larenstein.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked at Van der Larenstein for 9 years, finished my PhD, wrote a few books, then decided that I wanted to do a bit more in the sector itself. I worked for the KNHS for 2.5 years, then worked for the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, and then 2 years ago, the position for Professor of Sustainable Equestrianism opened. So I thought, hey, that's what I wanted to do a few years ago. So now it's my chance.
That fits perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I came back.
Yeah, nice.
And there was still a few research fields that sort of started before that, where I thought, hey, I can still keep doing this. So that was fun. So obviously I've got quite a few new research fields, but there's also still some stuff that I managed to sort of pick up where I left off.
It's nice because actually in the intro I mentioned a lot of those things in your books, and so it was beautifully filled out now. That little bit of
good.
That
cool.
Works out well. Yeah. So of course we've seen each other in various seminars over the years and conferences, and most recently at the Horse Welfare Summit in Sweden. And of course in the past, not so much now, but definitely in the beginning of coming to Europe, I kind of had this view of a practitioner or a horseman, or a clinician, a rider, a trainer, and then a scientist didn't really go in the same, seat.
Yep.
And of course, through my own experience, that giving a demo and then someone from a science background or a horse behavioral
Grills you.
science, yes, stands up and says, "You're doing this and this and this," and then I think, oh, they don't understand. They need to work with horses more to get what I'm talking about. And so I always felt that sort of divide, and then I myself in the beginning was sort of thinking, oh, I hope someone doesn't come with a science, because also I'm in the beginning not a highly intellectual person. I'm a practical person. I was not good at school, and so I went to working with horses, and I did an arts degree and all those sort of things. So I already have that sort of going on. And then I got through phases where I was like really trying to prove, but this is what they're telling me, the horses, and it doesn't match. And then as I went along and sort of got more interest in research and of course reading all the literature that was coming out. And
did you really read all the literature that was coming out?
Not all, but the ones that were popping up.
Take my head off.
And the ones where I thought, well, this is, my ex-wife was a biomedical scientist, so I knew the criteria then of what a real science experiment should look like. That you need actually certain amounts of testing to create data and all that sort of stuff. Not that it's free Icelandic horses that have never had contact with humans, and you're going to measure the stress response in horses, something like that. So then I started to realize, like, actually, this research paper is explaining exactly what I'm doing, and I could start to understand more of what I was sort of feeling and learning through the process of working with hundreds and hundreds of horses, that you then get this other kind of perspective. But for you, how do you see that? Because, of course, we will talk about unity a little bit later and the importance of that. But how do you see that as far as a practitioner, scientist, unity coming together to be able to have a better understanding of what we're doing and what works and how we can find solutions for it?
Well, first of all, I'd say I agree, but I'd obviously no. I was going to say I have to say that because I'm sitting here. No, but I do agree, and I think one of my biggest, well, to put it bluntly, I'm not good enough a rider to be able to ride. So the only other thing I can do is be the scientist to help you guys. Yeah, but also because when I hear you talk, I sort of hear you saying, yeah, but I'm not intellectual, which, by the way, I don't agree, because also what is intellectual, but I could say the same thing. I'd love to be able to ride the way you do. I do okay. I'm good at staying on, but I'm nowhere near as good. So what I try and do is I try and support the equine sector with the talents I've been given, lots of creativity and a lot of energy, and then that's kind of where it ends. So I just kind of go on. No, I'm joking, but I think the most important thing, and we can talk about this in terms of science and practitioners, but also horse world in general, is that you always need different talents to make something work.
Yeah.
In a team, if you have a team that consists of people that only have the same talents, you'll never produce good work. And only a team that comprises people with different talents will come up with something incredible. And I think the equine sector should take heed here and try and embrace all the different facets that make up a successful sport, industry, whatever else. And when we're talking practitioner and scientist and horse and rider and trainer and whatever else, they all come at it from different angles. What you feel, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but hopefully also in our webinar that we'll do together, the combination of you being able to feel, but perhaps a scientist saying, okay, now in order to make this repeatable also for the people who are watching you, it's actually really useful to have, shall we say, a framework of principles. Because then, as magic as it is to watch you work, if we can, shall we say, decipher it and say, okay, but there's a framework of general principles underlying what it is that you're doing makes it much easier also, for you to perhaps repeat the process, but also for others to say, okay, then I have to do this, this, and this, and this. And yes, I might have to become as refined, or I might need to practice to become as refined as Tristan, but at least I know what the different steps are, because I can see them, because a scientist have gone in and has sort of deciphered the whole process step by step. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And of course, in science, something that's repeatable is an important factor of.
And that is why we're doing this, because the magic that you feel is because you've also, in essence, trial and error. So you keep repeating stuff, and then you notice yourself, oh, does this work? Doesn't it work? And then you develop a system because you know it works. But what are the underlying principles? And if we can find the underlying principles, and we find them by developing theories and then testing that theory.
Yeah.
And once we've tested that theory, then we know, okay, so this is what this is based on, which basically means you can apply it across different situations. And then obviously the next trick is have a look at the different situations, and where they vary, then you have to see, okay, so that principle that I applied in that situation, there it worked. Does it also work in that situation?
Yeah.
And if it does, great. Then you perhaps get closer to it becoming a general principle. If it doesn't, okay, then it might be contextual.
Yeah.
And that all gives you much more information to apply, because who knows, perhaps the warm-blood horse might react totally differently to the cold-blooded horse.
Yeah.
And what science helps us do is it helps us determine, what are the principles, so that in your case, that your followers, and that is probably also why your system is so successful.
Yeah.
Because you've tried to sort of break it into different steps, and into the different contexts, and applying it to how it works in the different contexts.
Yeah, and that's necessary. I know as a trainer, every trainer has to do that, and someone that's developing a method to be able to teach the masses, that's a critical part. You can't just go and say, here's a whole library of me doing stuff with horses. I hope you can learn something. No, the people need to be guided in a way. And of course, you have many different types of horses, many different types of people, many different types of combinations. So unless you give some framework, I know, of course, our good friend Warwick Schiller has a book, The Principles of Training.
Yeah.
It's something that gives people a framework, understanding what are they actually doing. How is the conversation with their horse, and how does that fit? And then you can get a visual of maybe where you're going to navigate to go to next, so you don't end up lost.
Yeah. And you see, if I could go back to what you said, in the early days when you were kind of hoping nobody would ask a question, I'm not quite sure whether that was quite the same, but once you have that understanding, the scientific underpinning, and see, I'm very much my glass is half full type of person, yet I like science, because just in case somebody does come and ask a question, and perhaps questions the approach, you always have an answer.
Yeah.
And and if you don't have an answer, but you've had the science background, then you can say, do you know what? That's a good point. Let's investigate.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that framework first, then you'd rather avoid the question because you don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that whole science approach, not that we have to assume that people will ask difficult questions, but they will.
Yeah.
I think we always need to move forward from a positive outlook, but at the same time, better be safe than sorry.
Yeah.
And basically meaning that once you've got you've got solid ground to stand on, engaging then in that conversation becomes much easier.
Yeah. And I enjoy the intelligent, deep questions, because it allows me to go into my craft and really bring out, and it enables me to express really the essence of what's important. And I say in the past, early on, I was not so familiar with the science. And often, of course, you when you start to make a name, you get people trying to say, well, let's go and see if he really knows his stuff. And you get them standing up and asking the question, and, well, science says, and then you sort of think, and that's also a difficult thing, I think, for people sometimes, is it's then very easy for someone to make a short clip on social and wear a white coat and say, well, science says that a horse is this and this and this. How is there a way in which people can sort of decipher between what is actual, real research that has depth and a body, and what is something that somebody heard and they said, well, this is the science, so it must be true?
Okay, so I think you're now sort of asking one of the most difficult questions. How do we...
We were on the topic of difficult questions.
Well, but okay, let me gather my thoughts. What you're touching on now, I also think is fundamental to also what we're struggling with at the sector. On the one hand, you have the definition of good science. You have representativeness, repeatability. And you can calculate that statistically. You can calculate sample sizes. However, and then you can conduct experiments in controlled conditions where you try and eliminate as many variables as possible. And then you have perhaps a lovely experiment. And if you have, and I'm really sorry, it's a bit of a dumper now, but then if you have lots of money, then, and if you've got a facility where you can do all of this in a almost in a laboratory setting, then you might be able to build a framework, a theory, a principle of whatever the topic is that you're talking about. But then you're going to go out into the real world and you're going to apply this. And all of a sudden, all these variables that you tried really hard to avoid and to manage, all of a sudden, they all come back to you.
Yeah.
And then the question is the stuff that you worked on, developed, in a clinical, in an experimental setting, does that still work in real life? And to what extent then does that still apply? And then you might say, okay, so you know what? We're just going to conduct a trial in real life, and we still want to keep the variables limited to the extent that we can still compare the results. But we also need to accept the fact that horse-rider combinations are all different. And then we haven't even talked about the practicalities of trying to get
the numbers
and the riders at the same level. Because this is the other thing, everybody, the equine industry talks about, we need more science. And me as a scientist, especially as an applied scientist, because I like to do my science in practice.
Yeah.
And I realize that there might be variables that might not be ideal. But that's also why I'm a professor of applied science. To me, that's life, and that's what I want to test.
Yeah.
But then I can't get the participants. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. And you have to offer people lots of stuff. And yet still, it's really difficult to get people on board.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. So in that sense, you can have an ideal, and then you've got reality. And then what you have to do as a scientist, and we find that very scary, I can tell you, you have to deal with what you get. And then the question is, what do you say? Do you dare to say, okay, so we did this study, we did the best we could. It was a bit of a dodgy thing to say, but we did the best we could because we realized this is the real world. And perhaps we don't have the hundreds of participants that we would have wanted, which, to be honest, we also didn't have the money for, because funding research into science is really tricky.
Yeah.
And we found this, and then do we say we need more research, which, to be honest, from a research perspective, that's also an ostrich strategy.
Yeah.
Because then you can always cover yourself. Yeah, but I said we needed more research. But perhaps we also need to say, based on what we did, we know it's not perfect, but we want to help the sector. Our advice is this, and actually be clear cut.
Yeah.
Because when you then...
This is the information we have from what we did.
Yeah. And with the experience that we have as scientists, professionals, we think that this might be a way forward.
Yeah.
Because what I also see is that we already talked about social media. Did we on this podcast?
We have done, but not today.
Okay.
We'll get there.
I'm even confused.
See, our interesting discussions in Sweden are starting to...
Precisely. It's trying to... but what we also see, because, the way we communicate these days with social media, people being able, which is a good thing in many ways, to sort of share their opinion, but there's obviously also a negative to it. But it basically means that because everybody is equal and everybody can share their opinion, we have this wonderful bias, and I have no idea whether you want to get into the biases already, but which is the Dunning-Kruger bias. And the Dunning-Kruger bias is the one that everybody knows, that people who know a bit about a subject are very much inclined to think that they're experts. And they've tested this in lots of different situations. They tested it with, car drivers. If you ask the general population, do you think you're better than average? 90% of people say, yes, I am, which obviously, statistically speaking, is not even possible. And so, which basically means that if you know a bit about something, you don't know all the stuff that you don't know. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But because you don't know all the stuff you don't know, you think you know all there is to know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Because you know very well the little bit you know.
Precisely. And that little bit is really easy to shout from the rooftops.
Yeah.
And because the human brain isn't super good at, the capacity to process lots of information is limited, and we don't like to hear it, but I'll give you the stats anyway. We're being confronted with 11 million bits of information per second, and we can only process between 50 and 60. And not 50, 60,000, 50 and 60.
Yeah.
Which basically means that...
Which is in the last millennium to now.
Precisely.
In the brain cooker era.
So you're being confronted with lots of stuff all the time, but you can't process it all. So if you read something where you're thinking, hey, that's nice and simple, because somebody has shouted it from the rooftops based on the knowledge that they have, you think, oh, that's easy to understand. And this is the Dunning-Kruger effect that we all know and love. But there is another part to this effect that many people perhaps don't know quite as well, and that is the experts, to which I'd like to count scientists, tend to think that they don't know as much as they really do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is partly because they know so much, they also know what they don't know.
Yeah.
But you can probably already see this one coming, which essentially means that if you know lots, but you think you don't know all that much, and you're worried that you might miss stuff, when you go on social media, not you, but you as a scientist, you are not black and white. You'll communicate, yes, but there's also this, and this, and it might be this, but it might also be this. So now you are the social media consumer, you, and you'll see two options. One is black and white, and let's not forget, you've also consumed lots of things, and you have to think about what's going to be for dinner, and that horse that you were training, that was really difficult, and and there's so many podcasts still to do. So there's lots of stuff also going on in your head, and you're reading something on social media. One is nice and easy, and it makes perfect sense. I don't really have to think about it. And the other one is a scientist going, yeah, but perhaps this is true, and that might be the case, and we didn't think about this one. And you'll go, I even get tired talking about it, and I'm only giving the example.
Yeah.
So what we get is this tendency for people to...
The one that's the loudest is the least
the
most
loudest,
experienced.
the simplest, because everybody goes, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So in that sense, this is perhaps also a shout out to scientists, and there we get back. It was a very roundabout way, but we're getting there because I knew where I was going with this. For us to also make sure that we communicate with you guys as practitioners to make sure, because you guys are so good at phrasing a message so that people understand it. We are not all that good at it because we keep sort of, and I'm not trying to say now that you only know a little bit. I'm just realizing this is not what this is going to sound like. No, but this is not. But you guys are much better at speaking the language that people want to hear.
Yeah.
So also for us as scientists, yes, we might be able to provide you with the framework, but you can help us communicate that framework because we're not very good at it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, when we're working together, let's make sure, when we're trying to build something in the equine industry, let's try and make sure that we recognize that everybody has their own role to play in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because we can't change the world, we need you guys to help us. Well, you need us perhaps to build the framework, but we need you for our message to sort of be accepted and be translated into something that people who are already busy can actually understand.
Yeah. Such interesting, such a strong thing, and also the clarification of the information, like you say, on social media that pops. I mean, it's so logical, and then we wonder why, as professionals in the industry, why the voices that are the most heard are the ones actually that know the least amount. Often, not in all cases, of course, but often.
Yeah.
That is, and then that creates a perfect picture for that. Can you remember the question when you stood up in Fleeing during the Q&A in my masterclass? I actually said that, didn't I? Oh, a science question out loud.
Oh yeah. But what I was asking, I think it was asking because I know I've got two. I had two in my head anyway. But I think I asked you about self-determination theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Good. Because see, what struck me when you were working with the horse at the time, you were talking about giving the horse autonomy. You were actually teaching the horse confidence at the time. You were the way you were working with the horse. You explained to us that it was really important that the horse was feeling confident enough to understand what's being asked of it. And then you said because you wanted the horse to also feel autonomy, being able, and this is the thing, to be honest, and that really resonated, and I keep thinking about it every time. Almost every time I sit on my horse now, because it really struck a chord. This whole, I need to be able to give him, in my case, Marengo, the ability to know that he can choose. This autonomy idea. And then because based on competence mastery, and autonomy, you create relatedness between the human, in this case you, and the horse. And that is a very, very powerful, talking about frameworks theories, and it's called the self-determination theory. And it's a theory of intrinsic needs of human beings. And that's a theory that ticks all the boxes because it's super easy to understand, because it's got 3 principles, which is, I think, why it flies, because it's not actually all that old, in 2000, which, in science terms, it's actually fairly new. And it really flies because it talks about human needs to develop mastery, that we all want to be good at stuff. We all want to be recognized for leaving a mark, whatever. We like it when people say, wow, you're really good. But we also want to be autonomous. We want to be able to make our own choices, which is why Corona was so difficult, because obviously, all of a sudden, we couldn't make our own choices. And we also want to be part of the group. We are also group animals. So we want to have interactions with each other, again, which is also why Corona was so difficult, because all of a sudden, the social dimension was taken away from us. And I really like self-determination theory because it allows you to also analyze a lot what's going on in the human world. But then when you were talking about this, I thought, hey, I recognize this. So my science question wasn't really all that much. I was just saying, have you ever heard of it? And to be honest, I think what you're telling us about this now, this is what this is. And I thought, hey, this is really cool because it applies to horses too.
Yeah.
So there's the framework that really fits.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, and for me, that it's a very important part at the base layer, or in the beginning part of a horse, really, of course, being able to make a choice. The simple part is that it's fair, but the powerful part is that he learns to be a good decision maker, and that he finds out that the physical action he chooses to take, is going to determine how he feels. So this for me
make
is
him more confident.
Yes, it's the basis of self-mastery. And of course, this in what we try to do for the horses is also the way I start to teach people more and more. That I'm not, so I'm not in the instructor, do this, don't do that, don't put your hands up, sit up straight, because there's no feeling in that. They have no connection to their own physiology. They cannot repeat it because they have no sense of what's happening. It's like following the GPS and then it switches off. It's like, well, now where the hell am I? How do I get back?
To me all the time. Yeah.
So if you can give an intent of a sense of what they should feel and lead them into the self-exploration of what they need to feel in order to first have an awareness of the feeling. Don't first try to execute and do the thing. First, be present and have an awareness of what is going on in front of you. And then allow your body to have the time to absorb that feeling, that it becomes part of your subconscious, that you are automatically starting to be able to replicate that over and over and over. And for the online training, this has for me also been a really powerful thing, because you give a framework and I try to focus on what they should be trying to feel, not what they're trying to do, and to focus on the why they're doing it, not what they're doing. You're standing here, you're doing this, you're lifting this. No, why are you doing that? And when someone focuses on the why and the sensation in their own body, then you can create your own unique feeling that innately fits you, and not you trying to copy something else. And I think horses also fall into that category sometimes in a technical aspect of riding, is that we're trying to put them into a certain structure or exercise that doesn't fit them. That's why vets are able to have very good businesses, because horses are not going with a good symmetry and a good order of movement that is serving them. They're often in a pattern that is actually not from them. So they're trying to go in a way where they're holding themselves in a posture or in an order of movement, a conversation in their body that's not suitable. So you get the breakdown of that. And I see it so much, the correlation between human and horse as individuals, but also together. If one's operating in that way and the other one's, it also doesn't go together.
So to those listeners who are now listening through the podcast, they obviously can't see me, but I was smiling. So my smile just broadened while Tristan was talking, because it resonated so much with my own sports psychology background. What you were talking about, really helping someone, self-mastery. And when we're talking about, okay, so this becomes again, but hey, you want the science. When we're talking about confidence, which is a really important, but this is all, it resonates throughout. So when we talk about confidence, you have self-confidence, and you've also got this term called self-efficacy. And self-confidence is a bit more of a general term. I'm confident, I go through life confidently. But self-efficacy is much more task specific. Basically meaning that and I'm now saying what you have to do, even though you were phrasing it beautifully, that you're saying, you want people to have the feeling, but in many ways it's having the innate feeling that you can handle yourself in that situation. And then being able to perhaps not even influence the situation, but being able to cope with the situation. And when we're talking about, because I think one of the things that a lot of riders do struggle with, and it's a bit of a taboo still, I do think it's getting better, but a lot of riders are also afraid, are anxious. And that can be physical, because they might have fallen off or been trodden on or whatever. But it can also be more, say, of an anxiety that's born from social rejection. What will people think of me if I do this? The whole, what will the judge think of me? The whole evaluation thing. And anxiety quite often arises when we feel that we're being confronted. When we feel, doesn't have to be real. This is really important. When we perceive a certain situation to be beyond our own capacity. So I often like to draw it as an equation where on the one side you have your perceived capability, and on the other side you have the real and the perceived demands of the situation. And if there is a minus, in the sense that the demands of the situation exceed what you can do, combined with how important the situation to you is, you'll get anxiety.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And by the way that you are structuring that experience, essentially what you're saying, okay, this is the experience, this is the demands of the situation, of the horse. And you're teaching people to have confidence in their self-efficacy.
Yeah.
Oh dear, I'm really hoping people are still following me on this. And by not just giving them a step-by-step, this is your recipe, but you're teaching them to sort of apply the recipe to the situation.
Yeah.
You're actually teaching them, okay, if these are the situational demands, but look, you've built your capacity step by step and you know how to deal with it. Really giving you a chance or really giving riders the chance to build also that very important aspect of confidence.
Yeah.
The confidence that then might develop into a feeling of mastery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the horse, of course. But, I then, again, talk about the rider, but...
Yeah. But it's exactly the same for the horse. And I think that's where a lot of horses, trauma is always a big word, but they actually experience a sense of trauma when they go into a situation that they're not prepared for.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And then they're left with only the instincts to survive. Starts with a feeling of uncertainty. You're uncertain, you don't know if you can, not knowing what to do is creating immediately the anxiety, and then the instinctual part kicks in to make sure that something goes in the right way. But of course, if you're put into that situation where you're left to go into survival mode, you come out of that situation, you have that resonating then in your body. It's a circulation of that experience, that previous memory, emotion to that event is now living in you, which then becomes repeatable the moment you get into a situation that has a little bit the similar elements, which says to the body, oh, this is not a good thing.
Especially when you've got a rider on top who then goes, either freezing, going, I don't know what to do, or trying to say, no, but you must listen and you must go into that corner.
Yes.
And the horse is going, but I don't really know how to do this.
Yes.
And then you get this spiraling and the rider getting more stressed because the rider doesn't really know what to do and the horse not knowing what to do.
Yes. And that steps thing is so important because, of course, the preparation is key, teaching to them before doing to them, trying not to put them into situations. I mean, this could lead me into 1,000 different
I told you.
channels here. So guys, I just wanted to interrupt for a moment to tell you about an amazing device we use here for the management and treatment of our horses and many other horses that come to the TRT stables. The Hofmag K8 is an electromagnetic therapy machine. It is a therapy for the treatment of bones, joint and soft tissue, which of course includes the muscles, really important for us. It's the next generation and leading machine in electromagnetic therapy. It works for a large range of treatments. It is accelerated healing by stimulating cells to kickstart the healing process. I use it on myself and of course all of my horses. If you want to find out more, go to hofmag.com/TRT. Say it again, hofmag.com/TRT. Now let's get back to the episode. So we talked about unity, of course, and the more I go into this discussion, though, the more I feel the brain's going in ideas and we see correlations. And so it's a very healthy thing between science and the practitioners. But where do you think the segregation comes from a psychological point of view?
In the equine industry, you mean?
Between disciplines. Because, of course, when, as a certain discipline, a certain sector is getting hit with criticism, it first creates a divide. That's the thing I feel immediately. Because often you hear the comment of, oh, well,
it's them.
Why are you criticizing us? Look at what the jumping riders, look at the gear they're allowed to use. And we
call it whataboutery.
Whataboutery, yes.
Seriously, in social license speak, it's called whataboutery.
Mm-hmm.
But what about them? Yeah.
So what do you think, how does that, to try to have a bit of an overview of why that happens and what that can sort of lead to as far as creating a very destructive kind of environment. What is the human condition that first makes you do that, and then how does that affect things going forward?
Well, going back in time, okay, so first of all, I think what we need to realize as human beings, we're not very old. If you Google it, you'll find 150,000 years, 300,000 years, depends a little bit on, how far back you want to go. But whether we're talking 300,000 years or 150,000 years in terms of evolution, that's literally nothing. Let's not forget our horses are 50 million years old.
Yeah.
So, as human beings, we are babies. Why am I saying this? Because even though we might now live in luxury and, being able to do all these cool technology stuff things, in terms of how we're put together, we might as well still be living in a cave. And that is really important because then we are group animals, because we're much safer in a group. So that instinct, that fundamental need to be part of a group, because otherwise you might get eaten alive by a bear, or a lion or whatever predator.
The sense of belonging is
tiger.
Yeah.
Being part of a group is essential, but you can't be part of a group that's really big. So you need a smaller group. And we also need that. We also need identity. So in addition to the whole being part of the group thing, and being an outsider is just about the worst thing that can happen to you. It's not for nothing that in prison, isolation is one of the severest punishments.
Yeah.
Because it's not for nothing that, again, Corona, I know, but that was one of the most severe times for us.
Mm-hmm.
Because being removed from the group is just cruel.
Yeah.
And that basically means that we want to belong, because it's also being part of that group helps us make sense of who we are. Now, we choose a certain discipline simply because we're good at it, because a lot of the time, and here we also come to the cause and hopefully also the solution. We choose a discipline because our parents or our friends, or we sort of rolled into it, and then we became friends with people at the yard and they all did one discipline, so then we also followed them. So our identity is very much tied to what we do, and in our sport, well, that relates to a discipline, or that translates into a certain discipline. But then one of the disciplines might get attacked, and being attacked is never nice, because we don't like being attacked. And us in that other discipline that might not be attacked will be like, it's not us, thank God. And that also gives us, and we just had we talked about self-determination theory, that feeling of mastery. We all like to feel that we're good at stuff. So actually, and this is going to sound really nasty, but unfortunately human beings are sometimes also quite nasty. What better way of making yourself feel good by pointing your finger at somebody else? Look at them, which in reverse basically means that I'm that much better because I'm not them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So in many ways, this is also human nature, and we need to accept this. The problem is that human beings find it really difficult to accept that we're not completely rational, because we're not.
Yeah.
We're driven by emotions, by instincts, and really in order to, shall we say, tackle this, we must come to a point that we realize that is who we are, and build in some fail safes, and acknowledging that yes, everybody is prone to an instinctive reaction. Everybody's prone to wanting to be drawn to their own group because that's what my identity is. And to be honest, if that identity falls away, what am I?
Yeah.
And that's a really philosophical and fundamental question. And people, I don't know, some people might now listen and go, oh my God, do we really have to talk about philosophy? But in many ways, I think that's at the essence of where we stand.
Yeah.
And understanding that by attacking someone, a discipline, and then I think this is also what makes the current state, whatever you want to call it, that we're currently in, also so difficult, because you're not being attacked on a technique, right? You're not being attacked. Oh, the way you do rising trot is crazy. Why do you put your outside leg back when you want to canter on? That's completely crazy. Put your inside leg. If that was now the hype, everybody would go, some people would go, yeah, my horse reacts better, but then possibly, okay, then, whatever. But the current state that we're in, that goes much deeper, because it's not just about the industry, but it's about the identity, the self-understanding of equestrians.
Becomes personal.
It becomes very personal. And perhaps sometimes it's not meant personally, but it feels personal.
Yeah.
And the problem is that feeling, as we've just discussed, you can't just sort of, sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah.
Or under the table, under anything. You can't, you can't magic it away. That feeling is there because it comes so close to what you've built your entire identity on. And then all of a sudden, somebody comes and says, do you know what? It's not just that you've done stuff wrong, but you've not cared enough.
Yeah.
You actually don't love your horse.
Yeah.
You've not cared. Me even saying it, and I know we're doing this in a podcast, it does hurt, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what we all feel, and obviously that's not conscious. A lot of the time that happens in your subconscious.
Yeah.
So what do? You turn to that group that supports you. You call your friends, you say, do you know what, but that's not true. No, don't you worry. No, but you're really good with your horse. Because that's what happens, because that's what we do.
Yeah.
My friend calls me and goes, do you know what? Oh, no, or I call my friend and I go, do you know what I've done now? And they go, no, but don't worry. Because that's what we do, because we know that social cohesion is so important. Yeah. And that person then tells me, no, it's okay. Your identity is still intact.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you've got a really good friend, that friend then says to you, you know what? Perhaps you haven't. And to be honest, and I've had that recently, that the owner of my yard came up to me and said, Inga, perhaps now and again, you do need to go and do something, and not just ride in the arena, but just go outside, because perhaps he's getting a bit bored. I was furious. Because it's because
Yeah.
I really, really, he's my soulmate. I've never had a horse as cool as he is, and I
Yeah.
love him to bits. And it really hurt. But she said it really kindly, and it still hurt. And and my defenses came up, and I said, no, that's not true. And then I thought, shit, actually, it is.
Yeah.
And I have told her afterwards, after my ranting. No. But it's also really good, and and even while I'm telling the story, I'm thinking, oh my God, should I tell the story? But I also think it's good that we tell these stories
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
also because guys, my job title doesn't permit me to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because that's but I do.
Yeah. And the
And
contrast between someone's intent and what you feel, like what you
absolutely,
say, it's
absolutely. But it was really good, and
yeah.
and I was so grateful to her because that's the real friends because they are actually daring to say, hey, I know that you love him, but what you're doing right now isn't actually all that good. And because she is my friend, and we have a connection, first it hurt, but then it made me think about stuff. And then I went for 2 weeks, I went and hacked every day. And he was great because he had been telling me, and I also knew that he'd been telling me
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he wasn't, and now he's happy as Larry again.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is but it's also really scary as a friend to tell somebody, do you know what? I know you come to me because you want my unwavering support, but actually, and I will give this to you, but I'm also going to tell you that what you're doing at the moment isn't okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying that the whole social cohesion thing is the cause, but it's also the solution.
Yeah.
But it also demands bravery of
Yeah.
us as equestrians because it basically means talking to our friends, talking to our own peers, and saying we are part of a group, but because we are part of a group and because we're friends, we also have to tell each other when stuff is not okay.
Yeah.
And we can do that in the smallest circle at our own yard. We can do it within our discipline, but we can also do it as the equine sector.
Yeah.
Because that's what real friends do.
Yeah. So when you give such clarity on that, especially about the hurt part, and you get a sense of where that comes from and the why, and of course you received that feedback from somebody you have a good relationship and does it out of a sense of care and explained it in a way that was sensitive. You can imagine the severity of an attack from somebody that doesn't know you and is, trying to tear your whole world down and make sure that you can't practice anything that you love anymore in the world. I mean, that magnifies that to a
Yeah, yes and no. It's really good that you're saying this because on the one hand, it hurts, but on the other hand, because you don't know that person, and because you don't know that person, it's much easier to ignore it because you don't know them.
yes.
And you said, where does that
Or they don't know
segregation?
you.
They don't know you, but you also don't know them. So it's much easier to let stuff not get to you. And because you said, where does the segregation come from within the industry, but also perhaps outside in us? Because it's much easier to sort of, because when a friend says something to you, it hurts much more because they're your friend.
Yeah.
But if somebody else says it to you, it's actually much easier to tackle that. We call it cognitive dissonance, talking about theories, which basically means that when two or more beliefs clash.
Yeah.
So the cognitive dissonance in this sense is, somebody's attacking me, but hey, I'm hearing them saying, oh my God, what you're doing, and you're going, but my firm belief is this. That clashes.
Yeah.
And that causes pain in the brain.
Yeah.
Hey, that rhymes. No, but it really, because it forces us to think about stuff, and thinking hard is not something that we try and avoid. And so when a friend does this, you really have to think about it because there's the need to keep the relationship intact. which is stronger than the need to avoid thinking really hard.
Yeah.
But when somebody from the outside who you don't know, you don't really have a relationship with, because hey, you've still got your social group that supports you, it's actually much easier to sort of do this and say, nah,
Yeah.
oh sorry, the audience can't see me doing this. I'm sort of pushing my hand forward.
Yeah.
It's much easier to sort of say, I'm ignoring you because you're stupid.
Yeah.
Because the people who I depend on for my social cohesion, they're still with me.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
So in that sense, so an attack from the outside does hurt.
Yeah.
But I think it's also the reason why we're sometimes still really good at just ignoring it.
Yeah.
Because we're not hearing it from our friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're hearing it from a group who are saying, yeah, but you're not part of our crowd.
Yeah.
And my crowd's still telling me that I'm doing good stuff.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important that we talk to each other.
Yeah. And is that then a difficult thing to, because as I'm sort of now less in just the sport of dressage and riding and competing, and my client base has always been broad, but I even feel now that I have more of an overview. I have international jumpers, I have international dressage, eventers, vaulting, reiners, from grassroots all the way to Olympic level. I see.
No pressure.
Yeah, they're
There
all,
you go. You're going to fix it.
yeah, but it's I see it as at the end of the day, if the horse has come and been at the Olympics, or he stands in the field in Margaret's field with her sheep most of the week, they're all horses, and they're all horse people, no matter how famous or how many gold medals the horse has won. When you feel that horse, the essence of him is that he's still a horse.
Yeah,
and the same for the one that stands in the field that's just been hacking out and having a wonderful time and thriving in his world, in his environment. But also, the riders are the same.
Mm-hmm. They're all human beings.
Yes, and at the core, they're all chasing the same thing. It doesn't matter if they're learning to lead their horse on a trailer, or they're trying to get the last of the 110s, or they're trying to get the horse over the Liverpool in Arca. They're all striving to be better. And so for me, I see that divide between disciplines and between people so unnecessary, because I see us as equestrians, not as he's jumping and he's, it's almost like a family that's wanting the same thing, but
still fights at Christmas.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I don't know if that's when you talk about the small groups, and I understand that, and there's a lot of security in that, especially when you're being attacked, because you go in, I can see them in the rugby scrum going, all right, guys, we're still doing the right thing. But is that a really difficult leap for everybody to, because I feel like I've said it a lot, and I get a lot of like dull faces at conferences. Oh yes, he's preaching, something that's very, inspiring, but
no, but I totally agree
see
with
us
you.
doing that.
No, but I do think that's the way forward. But there is this but. Sorry. The thing is for us human beings, a group for us isn't thousands. A group for us, 15, 20 people max. That's why we also see that. If you leave people to their own device, they always naturally form groups. Horses do too. It's a really big, because even when you've got, I don't know, the Mustangs in America, I don't really know. The big groups. When you see them sort of canting across the plains, it appears like a really big group, but they are subgroups.
Yeah,
they're not. It's not 150 horses all part of a group.
Yeah.
You have to have smaller subgroups. So we do need to appreciate this. But I do think but we have natural subgroups at the yard.
Yeah.
Because these are the people, and to be honest, it starts because we all have our own social communities. It's also with equestrians. I have the people at my yard, all my friends at the yard, but I've also got my people at work. I've got people that I work with. And they all influence what I do. because I can't have contact with the whole world. You have your clients, followers, fan club. No, yeah, Tristan's smiling now, so I did kind of struck a chord there. No, but you obviously don't have personal contact with all of them, so you are also influenced by the people that you engage with on a daily basis. And then you've got the big group, and some of them are closer to you than others. And so in that sense, influencing that behavior and changing them depends on the one hand on what you do with your immediate group, but then what you teach that immediate group, they will carry that on to their group. So your message spreads, but not just because you're teaching it, but because some people adopt it, and because they're such big fans of your teaching methods, they'll infect others in their social circle. And then they'll then go on and affect others in their social circle. When we're talking about communication, there's actually there's two models, and one is the fireworks model. It's cool, which actually is that you send a message, and just because it's just one message, it gets spread really quickly like firework, right? And this is also what we see on social media when something goes viral. Stuff that's really catchy might go viral. But does it change behavior? No. It might get shared as a communication tool, as a message, but the underlying behavior that should follow from reading that message isn't quite as easy. Because changing behavior, as we know, takes a lot longer. And to get me to motivate me to change my behavior means that I also have to make sure that what I'm doing isn't completely out there and I'm not being an outcast. So what I'll do is if I hear people in my social circles talking about this as well, then I might go, okay, so perhaps I also need to adapt my behavior, especially if I see that other people also do it. And then perhaps 2 or 3 in my group of 9 friends, once they start adopting it, I'll go, oh yeah, perhaps now I'm also going to do this too, because I'm not the lone nut anymore. And then that spreads. But then I and a friend of mine might also be part of another group. And then because it's the 2 of us, but even 3 in another group, we'll go, oh, do you know what we've done? And then all of a sudden you're spreading this to that other circle. Takes a lot longer than a message going viral. But once you've changed that behavior in that group, that's it. So while I absolutely share this, we are one big group and one big family, we also have to acknowledge that the social dynamics at play do also happen at a smaller level. But having said that, I do think that we need to remind ourselves that the one thing that connects us all is the horse. Regardless of what you do with it, whether you walk with it, whether you walk with it, whether you do handstands on it, whether you jump with it, or perhaps whether you do all of those things.
No, absolutely.
Okay, is this good? Is this bad?
Good, but now I'm at a fork in the road, but I've just made a decision. All good, mate? So this goes also to YouTube, so we have, but there is Spotify people, and so it's good that sometimes we reference.
Because I listen to, that's why now and again I do this, and then, obviously you guys can cut it if you think it's nonsense.
No, but it's good, because it is like that sometimes. Sometimes, especially if I see a guest and I see their face change, and I think, or I see, the body language. For those people that are not watching the visual one, it's a really good thing.
But is this okay where this is going now? Not too intense? Is this what you were hoping
perfect.
for? Okay, cool.
Perfect.
I also find stuff scary, by the way,
but if we feel the energy, they will feel it. It's good. And if he nods, then you know it's good.
Okay. You've gone to sleep, no. Okay, fork in the road.
Yeah, so if we're talking then about the criticism and the groups, and behavioral patterns. If we think about negative versus positive in the space, of course, self-awareness is necessary. You can't start a direction of positive change without some self-reflection, self-awareness, someone holding up the mirror and say, look what you're doing. And of course, there's still many, many things that need to improve in not only the horse world, but the world. As humans, we're all striving to be better. And of course, I'm seeing that firsthand in the field because I'm getting all the horses that have difficulties, and you start to read and see why those things are happening. And of course, we need a clearer idea of what is a good moral and ethical practices across the board. What is the code? What is the guideline? And that's difficult because, of course, it's a very wide spectrum, the horse world. You have people that want to see horses running with the butterflies under the rainbow and never see a human interfering with that. And then, of course, you're having maybe not the extreme other end of the scale, but if you compare it to that, you may have someone with a sales yard who's having the horses purely as a commodity and trying to monetize it and get quick results and make money. And they're not sitting and watching them run in the butterflies and enjoying it. Some maybe are, but just to make an example. And then, and so of course it's the reflection part is important, but I think we can sort of go over the negative thing over and over and over for the next 100 years and point fingers and pull people down. And I'm not sure how healthy that is for people that are making that a career, going onto social media or having, and they have also great skills. A lot of these people, they're very resourceful. Someone that's
because it makes them feel super good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know this is. I'm sorry to interrupt. Because
I will release you on this in a moment. I'll let it build up inside you. Yeah, of course. When we think about things like Joe Dispenza says, if negative thoughts make us unwell, then not just positive thinking, but with the right energy and the positive energy, you can make yourself well. And if you have an area in a sector that is considerably unwell or we need to improve, that's somewhat of making something healthy. And that doesn't come through continual negativity. And of course, the negativity for the person that's doing it, I think, is a very unhealthy space to live, because of course they also get criticism and lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. But if the goal is to help horses, I'm not sure that if you think about the negativity and the divide and the segregation that creates, that it pushes things underground where nothing is in the public eye anymore. Nobody wants to share anything. They're editing and they're putting a short clip because the horse might become one stride behind the vertical, or there's one uneven step of irregularity, and people are so scared to post a photo, let alone a video. So, and of course, for me, I have the feeling, sometimes if I create a positive comment, then it's going maybe against what somebody is trying to point out is negative. So immediately they get defensive and they start to look for videos of me like that. And I can tell you, I've made hurtful mistakes, many, over my life. It's a way of, it's what's given me the awareness of what I'm doing and how I can help others to be aware of what they're doing. So it's, not that I've never made a mistake, and I will continue to make them in the quest to be better. But I sort of go with that positivity, try to create inspiration, motivation. I remember being at a horse welfare conference and somebody stood up from a animal welfare group and said Martin Luther King was a great man. He was against racism. And that for me just painted a complete picture of you're standing in the negative pool of whatever, because of course the man was not against races. He was for freedom. He was for equality. So, and of course, you can't create a movement of positivity and the small groups telling the other groups by continually, creating segregation and people hiding away and not wanting to share and not wanting to dare to say to another in the end, maybe this is better. But it's sort of, how do you see that in human behavior? That sort of because we've seen some drastic things, and
Yes,
of course,
of course.
not everything is going, and that's what I say. I'm living in it. I get the horses that are extremely traumatized, from professional people that are trying to do their best, and yet things go wrong, of course. But it doesn't help to okay, we need the reflection, but at some point we need to get into the positive thing, because I'm only seeing it from that sort of perspective, but I can imagine from human behavioral perspective, it is much, much more damaging than we can understand on a human personal level. Illness.
You see, when I was listening to you, and the nice thing is then being able to sort of take a step back, figuratively speaking, obviously. And sometimes I then think, oh my God, it's ludicrous what we're all doing here. It's completely crazy. It's, we've got the best sport in the world. No, but what we have at its core, you don't really get much more beautiful than that. And again, I don't want to be, but being able to interact on a daily basis, or not, but regularly with an animal that much heavier, stronger than you, and being able to do this without words, it's so cool. Yet we're all fighting each other. It's almost like a civil war that we're fighting at the moment. But then, so that was my first reflection. My second one was obviously, as you were talking through your thoughts, I was sort of also going through the options, my mental commentary as you went through it. And first of all, without boring anybody to tears, why do people point out the negatives? Well, that does have something to do with, it does make you yourself feel better if you can point out what somebody else is doing worse. Again, that is partly human nature, because it does take a lot of self-esteem, another one. So self-esteem, recognizing your own worth as a human being, to be able to recognize competence in another. Because that it's much easier to criticize somebody else than to say, wow, this is really good. Because by praising somebody else, you're acknowledging that they can do something that you can't. And when we sort of come back to the whole mastery stuff, that's something that we struggle with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's much easier to, but so this is also why we see that people who are generally recognized for their skill, that sometimes it's almost a hype, simply because if they're being recognized by some people as being really good, then it must be safe to recognize them, because clearly they're so much better than we all are. So that's okay. So I'm actually still intact in my own, what I think I'm good at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To pull these people down, there is an important psychological element to this, because by pointing out their errors, it basically means, hey, do you know what? They're not non-fallible. They are fallible. Hey, do you know what? I've always been regretting that I'm not as good as that, and look at them, but at least I don't do that. Makes me feel better. And I do realize that I'm making this, this is a bit black and white, but there is an underlying mechanism here. But
also why it's someone often that's up there and not, well, we don't waste our time with lady down that's hacking out and having a lovely time.
But they're not. But it's them, and we've always admired them, and secretly we're always jealous that we can't ride like that. Hey, and you know what?
Or they see a fault from their perspective, that not everything's perfect, and yet this group is idolizing them when they shouldn't, because it's not all 100% correct, or none of it is correct, or whatever the perspective might be.
The problem is, but what we've created here, because we are, rather than sort of recognizing that actually we've got all talents in our own way, and because this is the other thing, I don't ride lots of horses every day, and to be honest, I could never be as good as that. That's beside the point. But I also do other stuff, so I shouldn't actually be measuring myself. Because to be honest, in many ways, that's also an insult to the professionals who spend all their time doing. How can I possibly, to be honest, if somebody who doesn't do science every day tries to tell me how to run experiments, I'm not all that keen on that either. I love it if they're telling me from a practical perspective what they encounter every day.
Yeah.
But and of course, it's really good when sort of some people highlight stuff. But really, this is also the world that we live in, that we sort of feel everybody has the right to comment just absolutely everything. While I'm thinking, well, you can't be super at everything.
No.
So that's also what we need to recognize. Some people are really good at others.
I have that a little bit in the stable. Sometimes I have people that have worked for me for a long time, or even working students, that they're in this environment, and we have a certain focus and what we're what we're practicing on a daily basis. And then a very highly regarded top international rider will come with a horse, and the students say, how the hell does she not know this? Like, it's so simple and plain why that horse is getting nervous, or why he's lazy, or how did you get there and not know this? But it's exactly that you just stated. They have been focusing on being a top international rider. They are not been focusing, on working out
treating behavioral problems with horses.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that we also recognize the fact that, again, we're not superhuman beings. We'd like to be, but we're not. Which basically means that we might be good at certain thing, but that we might also be rubbish at other stuff. That doesn't make us a bad human being. It just might mean that, but I guess also the fact that information, everything's available at a fingertip. We tend to think that we have to be able to do everything all of the time.
Yeah.
And I think, I also see it in my students who get completely overwhelmed a lot of the time with all the stuff, with all the choice that there is now, where, they call it paralysis through analysis, but also think paralysis through choice. Because you're thinking, oh my God, what should I do? And I think there's value in saying, okay, do you know what? We help each other, and we're actually sort of coming full circle, which is always nice. I do have another topic though. Sort of to recognize that we all have our own world, our own reference frame from which we act on a daily basis, and that basically means that simply because it can't encompass everything. So then we need to help each other. Hey, do you know what? There is another perspective, and it's perfectly okay that wasn't your perspective, simply because you weren't in a position to experience that.
Yes.
But now, the circumstances or environment has shifted. So hey, do you know what? I am now going to show you a different perspective.
Yeah.
And this actually leads me onto my last reflection that I had, while you were talking this through. It's much easier to point out problems because you don't have to have a solution.
Yes.
But when we're talking behavior change, any roadmap to behavior change starts with knowing where you're going. And when we're talking about how do we need to make things better, you go, again, for those who are listening, I've now got Tristan's attention because he just shifted in his seat and he's just looking at me completely differently. So he's thinking, hey, what's she saying now? Okay, there we go. Now, are you ready? No.
Yes, I am. Behavioral change. That's now we're getting to the sharp, pointy edge.
But essentially so it's really easy to identify the stuff that we don't want, right? And then we say, we all need to change. But to be honest, if you need to, if you want to get people to actually change, you need to tell them what to do. It's the whole don't think of a pink elephant. What you're going to do, you're going to think of a pink elephant. But if I say, you know what, I don't want you to think of a pink elephant, but I want you to think of a white elephant. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Now I'm not thinking anymore of the pink elephant.
Yeah.
But what we tend to do, we tend to say, yeah, but this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But we're not saying what we actually want.
Yeah.
So how are we going to invoke change if we don't know where we're going?
Yeah. It's
So
like,
we're all sort of chasing our own tail.
it's like the skiing through the forest. Don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree, don't hit the tree.
Yeah. No, precisely, but that's
Not
precisely what it is.
Follow the path.
There you go.
Yes.
So when we're talking positivity, this is positivity because our brain also doesn't accept not.
Yes.
Our brain doesn't actually understand not. Our brain needs stuff to fill the void.
Yeah, as in not, don't. I have students that say that. Don't tell me what I shouldn't do. Just tell me what I need to do.
Precisely.
Yes.
Because it's the pink elephant.
Yes.
If I say to you, don't think of the pink elephant, my brain goes, yeah, but the only thing of relevance here is the pink elephant because that's something I can imagine.
Yeah.
So if you don't want me to do that, tell me what you do want me to do that.
Yes.
Sometimes in practice it works when you say, don't lean back, because I've translated this in my head as lean forward.
Yes.
But it does mean that I have to make the switch and I have to hope that that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we need to do when we're talking positivity, we need to first determine what the behavior is that we want to see. And then we have the behavior that we don't want to see. And then we need to determine the obstacles. And the horsey world, and also the rest of the world, they're really good at saying, oh yeah, do you know what? They just don't know enough. Do you know what? We're just going to give them lots of knowledge.
Yeah.
But we've already just said that, to be honest, there's already so much information in this world that, how much else are you going to cram into somebody's head?
Yeah.
Sometimes knowledge might be a thing, but sometimes the barriers might be because the people at my yard, they're going to laugh at me if I do this. I might know, but they all think I'm nuts. So I'm not going to do it because I'm worried I might get ostracized for doing it. Or, you know what? I'd really love to do this, but I just don't have the money, the time, the space to do it. Or it might be that I actually know how to do it, but do I actually have the skill?
Yeah.
We all know the whole rising trot thing. You can read all the books about rising trot. You're not going to be able to do a rising trot until you get on the horse and do it, right?
Yeah.
So there's different types of barriers. There's a lack of knowledge, and that's easy enough to fix because everybody goes, oh, you know what? We're just going to give them this knowledge, and then why are they not doing it? Well, because there might be different barriers.
Yeah.
So, but again, determining the barriers only works if you've determined
where you're going.
What precisely, because otherwise you might not even, that barrier might not apply. So, and you can already see where I'm going with this. There is no quick fix for this one.
Yeah.
This takes time.
Mm.
And it also means sort of, because everybody wants the magic wand, we'll do this and then everything is sorted. Somebody asked me, I don't know when, a little while ago, they said, so what's the biggest problem we need to fix? And to every single person, there's one thing that to them is the biggest problem. In that sense, what's the biggest problem is that we need to determine what everybody wants their ideal behavior to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be big for the industry as a whole. And sometimes that can be for me as an individual. And sometimes it can be even as small as on a daily basis,
Yeah.
But first, and this is also perhaps a good exercise to give everybody to sort of think about, okay, if I could choose, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to give people homework?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. And you have to report back to Tristan whether you did it. Pick the one thing that you think that isn't ideal in your own daily life with your horse. Pick the one thing and that you think is a behavior that might need change. Then pick a definite, your goal, what you'd like. And then first of all, figure out what is holding you back right now. Is it really that you don't know enough? Well, then that's simple enough. Go and sign up.
There's a lot of information out there.
Yeah, no, see, I was going to say, he's not being so good that he's not. So I'm going to plug it for you. Sign up to the course. No, sorry. We didn't discuss this before. No. But, determine for yourself, where is the barrier for you? And then, because once you also know where that barrier is, then you can find solutions. And all of a sudden, it's not looking at the trees, but it's looking for the path. But if I don't know where the trees are, I can't find the path in between.
Yeah.
So by determining, and just as an exercise, figuring out, okay, so, what is it that I want to change? How do I want to change it? And then, really, really, really important, try and determine where your personal barriers are.
Yeah.
And then find a way around them.
Yeah. So if we're talking about that being one very crucial element, what is it that makes it difficult for change? Because, I've now been involved in a lot of the large organizations in different disciplines, and attending seminars and International Dressage Trainers Club meetings and roundtable meetings and stakeholder meetings and people that want to create change, and it just seems to be the same discussions, most of them based on political correctness or a way of representing yourself to boost your business to survive in the horse world. Scared to say anything in case that affects your livelihood. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on at those places, but there just seems to be this sort of Groundhog Day in those discussions where you're like, oh, they're going there again. Oh, they're going to create a working group to support the working group, to support the first working group, to be able to make a decision on how we may even be able to change. And it seems to be kind of blockages and stoppages. We just did a blockages and stoppages in our new riding course. Maybe some correlation there between the horses blocking and stopping and the humans. But what is the crucial elements that makes it difficult for behavioral change? Maybe in humans in general, but maybe also specifically in the horse world, because one of the major things that I feel is particularly in the dressage world is we're steeped in tradition. And so a lot of the time I think, tradition stops people, but are there other areas that, and what are some of the things we can do to get over those hurdles?
Well, this is, it's another talk now. And when we're talking behavior change theory, I've just spoken about the barriers, but there's also such a thing called an intervention, or rather an intervention function. I work a lot with the COM-B model and the behavior change model developed by researcher Susan Mitchie in healthcare in the UK. It's a brilliant model. I don't know whether she's into horses. Susan, if you're listening to this, oh my God, you're my hero. But the model is, so essentially, we're talking about barriers, capability, that's, do you have the knowledge, the practical skill, opportunity, do you have the physical resources, the money, the time, whatever, and the social support, and the motivation. And motivation, then we're talking about all the different cognitive processes. And we divide motivation into reflective motivation. So this is, the stuff when I'm setting goals or when I'm being confronted by my friend to say, what, you really need to think about this stuff. But we've also got the automatic motivation, and that is all the habits, routines, tradition that have become automated. That's why it's called automatic motivation. So it's become automated. And essentially, when something has become second nature, it's actually become part of your subconscious. So you're doing it automatically. So just by somebody sort of telling you need to do something differently, we'll just go in here and out there, simply because it's become a subconscious part of who you are. So when we look at the intervention functions, and there's 9 of them, and they go from from education, training, persuasion, which is literally emotionally tinted messaging, coercion, forcing somebody to do something, regulation, the modeling, changing the environmental restructuring, and I think I might be missing one, but you get the picture. And we actually know that not every intervention maps onto or targets a barrier.
Mm.
And, I already talked about the stuff that we're sort of saying, we're big fans of education. The problem is that education as a function does not do anything to automatic motivation.
Mm.
So we are super keen, and keep talking about science and more educational courses, but the biggest issue is automatic motivation.
Yes.
So we keep doing this.
Yes.
And again, our listeners can't hear it, but I'm sort of trying to, sort of 2 ships passing in the night, which with the ships it's a good thing, but in our case it's not, because we actually want something to hit the mark.
Yeah.
But what helps with automated motivation is emotion.
Yeah.
Because and this is where I have to have a dig again at my scientist friends, and also at myself, because we like to be objective, truthful, neutral, because oh my god, if anybody ever caught us having an opinion.
Yeah.
But you know what? Opinion, emotion, showing feeling is the only thing that's going to change automatic motivation.
Yeah.
Because it's that trigger,
Mm.
the oh, that's what's gonna get that subconscious into the conscious.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That doesn't quite help us yet with our paralysis through working groups. But what we have here is we get these echo chambers, and people do feel really good because they feel that they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll just do another working group, because then at least everybody thinks that they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
So here we also need some leadership, because at some point, I'm a big fan of listening to people, because what we're doing here, if we want to change stuff, we do need to do it with stakeholder. We need to get people to feel that they're being heard, because if we don't do that, people then feel that okay, they've just been ignored, and then then you've got the whole, hey, but they're ignoring me, and then you get the emotional clogging up of the system. However, once you've heard everybody, and that's also why I like this model, you can hear people, you can look at, okay, so what are the different barriers that people are experiencing? What are all the different barriers that we're experiencing here? The whole range. But once you are only taking the barriers and taking the people away because you've already spoken to them, and once you start to take a step back and sort of categorize them, then all of a sudden you can say, okay, so we've got barriers here, here, and here, and then people will also have suggestions, right? Because people always do. Then we can also have a look, okay, so which suggestion might actually target that problem?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we've got that path. The one with the trees.
Yeah.
So, because I think what's happening is the working groups are useful, but I don't think anybody's noting down all the problems that are being discussed and saying, okay, do you know what? Let's just categorize this stuff, and let's see that we can actually come up with a roadmap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they do make a roadmap, they might have made one, but that is probably not based on all the problems that were first identified.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets lost in the discussion of opinion rather
Precisely.
than.
And then the person who shouts the hardest, they might get heard.
Mm.
So then it's their roadmap, but that's only theirs, and that won't fly because it's people know, hey, but that's not what we supported.
Yeah. Yeah.
And perhaps there we come back to what you said. So in order to tackle this, let's just ignore all the different disciplines, but just ask everybody, what are they struggling with? What are the different problems?
Yeah.
And develop a roadmap from there.
Yeah. And it's, of course, difficult to change an aspect of behavior if the goal doesn't change. To give a simple...
It's impossible.
it's logical. But to give an example, if you think okay, we're going to decide that nobody rides with spurs anymore. But the horse has to be shown in a way that he is active and he is responsive and it's refined. And or the rider says, well, my goal is to get the horse like that. And that's the only way I'm able to get a result in order to do well in competition.
Yeah.
And this has always been part of my tools to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to take away one of your tools to be able to. It reminded me sometimes of the bit in Formula One when they took away the slicks, and of course they're getting faster and faster and faster and faster, and then they made everyone go on a groove tire.
Yeah.
And of course, the times got really slow for like a year. I think they caught up in a year or less, and then they were on their way to making faster and faster times again. The goal being for that sport speed.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the goal that people have is different.
Yeah.
You know, what we are trying to
yeah.
achieve is nobody can agree on what we're trying to achieve. And then everyone blames, you know, the person that is setting that goal, you know, quite often the judges and, of course, the riders because they're riding like that. But why are they riding like that? Because to be successful in sport, to go to that goal, they're trying to produce that image in order to be successful. So, I mean, it's quite logical, but at the same time, it's very complex.
Yeah. And in that sense, we actually, so it's really good that you're saying this, because what is the goal? But then, you know, we can also say that, okay, what the, sorry. The goal, I can see it, but I can see it in my inner eye, but that's not very much used to any of you guys. Not even any use to you, just so you're sitting opposite me. No, but you know, the horse that's relaxed, that's harmonious. But you see, the tricky thing here is that we talk about this, but we've not even ever really described this.
Yes.
Because we're sort of assuming everybody's got their own idea, which is also why I was perhaps struggling to sort of get the words out just now.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, okay, so what am I trying to describe? And this is also partly because we're back into the automated routines that we have as a sector, because you know we've all developed ourselves in a certain way, so we have this image as what we consider that's the way forward.
Yes. And then we have complicated words that are there to sort of give us guidance, but that's maybe not what they do in the end. Things like classical or training scale, things like these, of course.
But even things like harmony.
Yes.
What is that?
Yes.
But what is harmony?
Yeah.
I got an 8.5 for my harmony score. Yes, in my test the other day, which I was super happy with. But at the same time, I was thinking, but what did she see now?
Yeah.
Because honestly, you know, so this is also how my work's actually influencing me by now, because obviously this is something that, you know, that I continuously think about. Okay, so what is that people are saying, and how do I define this?
Yes.
And as happy as I am, I can't even enjoy it as much anymore, because I'm thinking, yeah, but what does that mean? What did she see? Did she like the fact that he had his ears forward?
Yeah.
You know that. And
I have a difficulty with that as well, because we sort of sometimes come up with an idea of what we're trying to achieve, and sometimes that might be, you know, seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
That you know, in one space, a happy athlete was like this big thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are we trying to achieve? A happy athlete.
Yeah, but what is that?
Exactly. It's and in the beginning, I think this is a word created by humans to tell other humans what they're doing is okay.
Yes, of course it is.
And so the difficulty in creating those ideals is a lot of the time they're in response to a defense. They are a defense in response to criticism, or it becomes something that we want to, you know, emulate. We want a scene to be doing good, so we construct something that has a word that has a good emotional attachment to it, that makes us feel good or makes us feel. And I struggle with it because I think none of the terms actually come from the horse.
This just to come from within. Isn't it completely crazy? Because let's not just say something and oh my God, and you would see pitchforks. I can see the pitchforks coming. at the end of the day, the sector that we're in right now, it is hobby. Sorry, but it's not 100 years ago. Yeah, just about. We still needed the horse in that case for warfare. Second World War. Well, a bit more than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
There, the horse still had a utilitarian purpose.
Yes.
It doesn't anymore in that sense. And please, again, not with the pitchforks, because I love what we do, and I do think that it has so much social value, and it has economic value, and it also has ecological value. It's another topic for another day. So the horse does have a lot of value, but but in many ways it's not, and also utilitarian isn't a good thing. But but if we're looking at what we're doing it because we love it. But isn't it then crazy that we need the outside world to tell us that they think that it's perhaps a bit dodgy what we're doing? Which, because let's face it, some of the stuff that we are doing isn't all that great all of the time. So in that sense, shouldn't we be doing something that arises from within us? Because it's second nature.
Yeah.
Because that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think the why is such an important thing. And I said it a lot in different settings, in different conferences about welfare, is that we are always focusing on what we're doing and not why we're doing it. We forget the essence. I often tell the story or get the people to reflect on, can you remember back to the first interaction, and try to get them to really visually remember their first interaction with the horse. And I explain about stretching up as a small boy and hoping that he would let me make contact, and then how that made you feel, what was the emotion, and that is your why you want to be with a horse, why you want to create connection. And of course that gets easily lost when we have to make a living from it, when you become a vet, when you become a rider, a trainer, a horse dealer, whatever. It's easy, you let go of that, and then we get into the what you're doing. You become a vet, you become a trainer, you become whatever, and everybody's reflecting on what you're doing. And because I think a lot of the time we forgot why.
I think this is brilliant, because you want to know what, because you just said was the first image that pops in my head. And I told you that, when I started vaulting, we didn't have pads. It's warmth, because obviously I sat on the horse bareback. I remember, with the handles, because you've got a girth, and it's the warmth because you have no saddle in between. So you said this hand stretching, but to me, it's feeling the warmth of the horse that engulfed me. And yeah.
And if you think about the sensation, now we're talking about things within. If you kind of remind yourself, do the visualization, simulation of that experience, and how that is viscerally affecting your body, where that takes your mind and the sensation and your physiology. And if we remind ourselves every so often about that, I think that can maybe stop us from going towards a path that becomes a lot about what we're doing.
And why the others are wrong.
Yes.
And why, but just the whole intention of, and being truthful as to why we're doing this, and just also doing a rain check now and again with ourselves.
Yeah.
Going, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Was this the intention?
Yeah.
It might not be. And that's okay, because sometimes we sort of get so single-minded, you're sort of on sort of railroad tracks, that you really do need to make an effort to say, oh, no, hang on, that was that station. We just passed that. Okay, let me just reverse. But I think we also need to accept that we are fallible, and this is what it comes back to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, of course, there's a big push on the critic side in not horse culture, but horse sport specifically, a press to take horse sport out of the Olympics. So for me, that says obviously the first image of that is take it out of the Olympics, then it's not on this prestigious thing like the people were also trying to pull down, but it's, obviously not going good in sport, because when people are using horses for achieving accolades, then they're just doing things that are not appropriate and ethical, so best just take it out of sport. What I hear when somebody says that is that we take the sport out of the public eye. And, I'm not sure that that's a healthy thing for the sustainability of horse people.
Certainly not.
No.
The drama, it would be an absolute catastrophe.
Yeah.
Partly because there is, see, we're living in a world that's becomes obviously ever more technological, malleable. We live in a world where we think we can achieve anything.
Yeah.
And because the Olympics, it is a big event, it's and it still carries so much meaning, and but what horse sport is, it's still, regardless of what people do or don't do with it, in essence, it's the connection between a living animal and a human being. It's the purity of that. At the end of the day, even though we might, we're really far with, mastering AI and all the rest of it, we're still really bad at protecting the environment. And actually, by taking out that one link that still links us as human beings to nature, to where we come from, I think symbolically, this is also a disaster.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Even sorry, I'm completely lost for words, as you can clearly say, but not just what it would mean for the sport itself, because obviously that that would actually say, okay, you guys, you've done it's punishment. You've not behaved as we'd expected you to. You've done stuff that we don't appreciate. So do you know what? You're just gonna go to bed early without any supper. That that's essentially what it is. But
Yeah.
and no, it now sounds as if I'm trying to create levity, which is not. But it's just pure punishment. We're removing you from the stage. But it does also mean that, okay, and now you guys just go and do your own thing and whatever.
Yeah, exactly that.
And that is.
And we've seen it in disciplines before.
Yes, of course.
And of course, when that goes underground and nobody's watching anymore, regulations and things that are in place to create good circumstances for the horses, that's then hidden. It goes underground and nobody sees.
Yeah.
And that's not good for any horse, because then we don't have reflection. We don't have the groups and the communities communicating of what we're trying to achieve.
But again, I also think that we're losing touch with who we are as people. Because even though we might be, as we said, we think we're super evolved, but we're not. We thrive on nature. It's not for nothing that the horse is so good for us.
Yeah.
That the horse has been shown to do so much in terms of, helping people get through trauma that no drug in the world can fix. They're using horses for Utrecht University. They are running trials with veterans with PTSD that can't be treated, that have not been treated with anything else. They've been unsuccessful. Where the treatment's been unsuccessful, any other treatment hasn't worked. But the horse does work.
Yeah.
Because it goes deeper than any other treatment we have, and I think the reason is because it speaks to something that is essential for us as human beings. So to lose something like this also loses that last connection. And I realize I'm getting very philosophical again, but I do truly believe this.
Yeah.
So protecting that, but also protecting, because if we then lose the sport, we also lose the whole protecting the environment that goes with the horse, which again is absolutely essential. And I knew I'd be able to get this in somewhere in this interview, but this is my other great passion, is making the living environment for horses acceptable, but also that it aligns with their natural needs, which also supports biodiversity, a clean living environment, improving water conditions, simply because when we keep horses, we have to have land
Yeah.
because you can't really keep horses without land. But a horse thrives in conditions that are biodiverse, that have trees, that have pools, that have hedges. And by designing the landscape so it fits the horse, also helps nature, which we need, especially in a tiny country such as the Netherlands. But it also makes us feel better because a lovely green environment. And again, there's scores of papers that show that engaging, living, working in a green environment is so much better for you.
Yes.
So by losing that stage, we also risk, losing something that's really precious to us all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could go on for
another day or two.
6 more days.
Yeah.
And so many avenues, but it's really good. I'm extremely happy that you would give your time to come here today. I'm extremely excited and have so much energy and thoughts going through my mind with the conversation. But of course, we will get to do it again in our live stream coming up. So that will be really nice to do.
How many hours will we need for that?
Yes, the people will be sitting live. So we hope they can hang on. But thank you very much for being a guest here on the TRT podcast. And
thank you.
Probably we'll have to do this again.
Yes, it was my pleasure. It was great to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So guys, I don't have to tell you to share this one. Be good to your horses, and we'll see you again soon.